Welcome to the DreamHack Download, everything gaming under one podcast. This episode brings you through my DreamHack origin story, then continuing with what's going on with our CSGO Masters tournament, and the hot topic of rebrands. Why are they so common this year? Time to find out.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the DreamHack Download. My name is Kyle and I'll be your host. Today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Reinessa, Blaine, and JV again. How is the time in Texas right now?
Texas is chill, man. I'm not going to lie. I was, full disclosure, not ready for that intro. I was mid-sip of water and I heard you say hello and welcome to the podcast. I have never gulped so hard in my life. I am terrified. Befuddled.
I could catch you off guard and keep you on your toes. I have to do it to myself because clearly that intro was rough, like it should be, from Kyle right now. But I'm glad that you're doing well down in Texas and you didn't choke on the water.
Yeah, man. You know, it was, I wouldn't say woody. It was more like a forest. That was that intro, probably.
Well, that's about what I feel like right now because these allergies are killing me.
Same.
It is allergy season in Washington.
Oh,
I don't have allergies. It even messes with me.
Yep. Every time that it gets nice out here is when we start to feel it in our lungs and feel it in our just breathing in general. So it's not a fun time to have the pollen about. But
see, I think the reason Blaine doesn't have allergies like the rest of us is because his beard catches all the pollen.
a
It
filter.
never gets up here. It
No,
just
it's a good
stays
filter.
in here. It's a good
true.
filter, yeah.
I just removed mine. It was getting a little bit too long for my liking. I could start to feel it when I was sleeping. That's something that I wasn't used to, and it woke me up a couple times. So away with the beard it goes.
I can't say that I had that particular instance, but a lot of people, for whatever reason, just thought that I grew this this God of War-esque beard. And I'm not Kratos. I could do no such thing. It was just sheer laziness. So this morning I was like, you know what? We got to record today. I'm going to look pretty and prepared. And that's probably why it hurts so much that you start an intro, Kyle, when I'm drinking a sip of water. I shaved for this.
You do look good, though. It's looking nice and smooth. That picture that was floating around, you had this like bushy thing on that looked like it was almost knitted. Not sure what filter or lack of filter was on there, but it was impressive.
TikTok can do incredible things.
Would have been had.
Yeah. It's not TikTok. I'll tell you what it is exactly. Just jump on like a 70+ person Zoom call, have a tiny screen and horrible bitrate. It's the perfect concoction to make it so that your laziness looks like a magnificent Blaine beard. 60% of the time, it works every time. Guaranteed.
Every time. Well, one of the things that we talked about last time with you, JV, was how you made it here to DreamHack overall. And if you guys have listened to that episode at this point, it was a little bit long. It was a lot of good information. And today we're going to hear about how Blaine made it to DreamHack and his origin story. The beard itself has its own origin story, so we'll wait for later episodes to get to the full beard origin. We're looking for Blaine's origin today, and how you ended up here at DreamHack, Blaine.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been a gamer my whole life. You know, I love video games, obviously. And when I was in high school, I had a LAN party group that was awesome. And some of these guys were talking about this show called PAX. And I was like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So 2007, went down to PAX, had an absolute blast. And I was like, these are my people. This is my community. And I was like, how can I be a part of making this happen? So in 2008, I joined the Enforcers, and that's where I really got massive amounts of experience in event management, and learned just a ton. Networked like crazy. So I really got myself embedded deep into everything I could. Meanwhile, so that was my volunteer time, and I also was hosting my own charity events and a few other cool things. So outside of that, I was in sales professionally and have been forever. Never went to college, by the way. Don't go to college, it's a scam. Just kidding. Follow your dreams if you want to go to college. So I've been in sales professionally forever. And, so between my, many years of event experience, being an enforcer and doing other things, and then of course having my professional sales experience, I have a interesting skill set that very few people do. So eventually, 2016 rolls around. DreamHack is coming to the U.S. And my one of my contacts was being hired at DreamHack to be the event manager. And he gives me a call and he says, "Hey Blaine, I need a sales guy with events experience who knows video games." I was like, "Shit, that's me. That is all of me." So I took a gamble because it was only a short guaranteed contract for DreamHack Austin 2016 to be a sales guy, try to sell expo booths and stuff, and also support the event. There's a lot of other stuff I could add in there, but the turning point came when DreamHack was attempting to hire a head of sales for the US, and I was not qualified for that job, but I applied for it anyway because it was shoot your shot, right? So I applied for it, interviewed, and later down the line after the interview, and I'll never forget this, the VP of the company, Stefan Magnuson, calls me up and he says, "So Blaine, this wasn't in our plan to hire a sales guy until we actually had a manager, but we think you're pretty clever." That was the line he said to me. And it hit me really hard because he's got years of experience. He's a very well accomplished, business person. So I really, really respected that, and that hit me deep. He said, "We think you're pretty clever and we want you to be a part of DreamHack's future in the US." So long story short, a few years later, here we are, still part of the team. And I was the second person hired at DreamHack for the US operations. And for what listeners should take away from that is that if you want to get into this biz, volunteer, network, get involved, do stuff. You can't just get hired by having general esports knowledge. That's not how it works. You need to gain experience and do things.
I was just discussing on Twitter today with someone about how to get further involved in the shows. And you are a prime example of that, Blaine, of getting involved at the ground level in any way that you can get your hands dirty, right?
Mm-hmm. My first enforcer task was being a bouncer at the PC room's security checkpoint.
Oh,
so I stood there all day looking threatening to keep people from trying to cut the line.
Did you have a beard back then in 2008 or no?
It was much shorter, but yes.
Okay, still formidable. I would not try to mess with that room.
Nope. That mohawk that was teal back in the day too. Whew, that thing stood out.
That was 2016, 2015, I think.
Oh man, back then looking like
forgot
a whole
about
ass
the
raid
mohawk.
boss. Damn.
I completely forgot. Wow.
Yeah, I did that for, there was a game I was working with called Gigantic by a studio called Motiga, and I was working with them very heavily. Their color was that aqua teal color, so I dyed my mohawk for that because I was going around with them to all the PAXs and E3 and stuff to be a streamer and with them do things.
And that was one of the coolest opportunities that I think you had before DreamHack, honestly, right? Like being able to go.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible.
Shows.
Yeah.
It was a precursor to what you do today.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Well, thank you, Blaine, for sharing that with us, and also not taking 8 minutes to do it. So
I timed it. It was a little over 3, so it was like the perfect.
Wow,
like,
I still have more time.
Yeah, well, that's what we edited Justin down to.
Cool.
You edited me down to 3. I assumed.
I think we got you down to 4 or 5 from the 8 minutes. So what we took out from Justin's is the time Blaine had today.
yes.
I just assumed that we were going with the SpongeBob time card that said 2 hours later and just cut out all of it. I'd be okay with it.
I mean, you'd miss some really cool origins of Justin, but other than that, or maybe even a nice nap. That's what I took.
Jesus.
So moving on to our next topic for today. This is actually something new that we're going to try, and it's going to be a little clunky, I think, to begin with, but bear with us. But a segment that we're going to call Reaction Time. And JV, you're going to start us off with your the first reaction time for us, actually. So what content did you bring today to discuss?
All right. I've 2 minutes, Reinessa?
2 minutes on the clock.
Whew, okay. The Smash community all day yesterday and a lot of today has been talking and juxtaposing 2 concepts. Concept 1, basically the idea is hard work versus raw talent. There's a lot of takes back and forth from a lot of people that are aligned on different sides of the skill spectrum, whether you have casual players all the way to people who are or at one point have been considered the very best players in the world. my take is if you work really hard, you can be a good player, even potentially a great player. But to be the very best player, it is a combination of talent and exceptional hard work simultaneously. The reality is that what people think of as talent as it applies to games or in general really comes down to someone's innate ability to recognize and solve complex problems incredibly quickly. I think that is universal across the board, whether it applies to Smash, gaming as a whole, traditional sports, anything, complex modeling, IRL, all of that. And I think that if you just sleep on that talent and you don't do anything with it, you don't have any hard work, you're not going to get anywhere with it. But people who are talented naturally and have this inclination, not only do they get further quicker, but if they approach it with a dedicated hard work mentality, they really have the best set of cards, I think, to be far and away the best in the world, period. And I'm not saying that you can't get far with just hard work, but if you want to get to the very best, I think that that's a spot that's reserved for just a few people. It's a hot take, but I'm sticking by it.
All right.
Can you fit it into 2 minutes?
He made it. He made it.
Wow.
Flying colors. It was well done. And I don't even disagree with him.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fair to me. It's I think a lot of that applies. Work ethic is another piece of that puzzle that a lot of people don't even know what that means. And being able to get up every day on time. Shower, shave, go to work, do your work the best you can. That's the basics of work ethic, right? But that applies to almost anything, especially if you want to be a competitive gamer, professional artist, whatever. If you don't work hard at it, you're not going to get anywhere. And a lot of people don't know how to do that.
I think, Reinessa, maybe you might appreciate this, but I know it was a hot take for a while in the Dota community whenever somebody was interviewing Sumeo, and he was asked, like, do you have any advice to any kids who want to be? He was like, oh, give it a shot for a year or two, and nothing comes out of it. It's a time waste. Don't even bother putting any more in. And I felt like I was one of the few people who was like, this guy gets it. He understands what he's talking about.
Yeah, no, he's not wrong.
Yeah. All right. Let's cue up Blaine. Blaine, you're next for the hot take. Reaction time.
All right.
It can be a hot take if you want it to be.
I don't think it's going to be much of a hot take, but just more of a reaction to a game that I absolutely love, been playing for a long time. So Destiny 2 recently has had a lot of changes since the split with Activision, and one of the things they've done is a move to a seasonal model of content. Last few seasons have been pretty good. However, this season has really fallen flat for a lot of players. The beginning of it was great, and the current spot is a little weird. And it's kind of disappointing as somebody who has almost 1,200 hours into Destiny 2 to see the way that the community has reacted to it. It's been very toxic, unfortunately, and there's been a lot of harassment of the developers, which is really, really sad to see. Instead of just, measured, concise feedback, we end up with just a lot of people throwing accusations or messaging community managers to fix bugs, which is not what they do. And it just kind of sucks. And the most recent thing here that happened last week was a new quest that was released, and some of their goals for it were, or the player contributions to the goal were a little bit too stretched. Then they made changes because the community wanted changes, but then the community came back and was like, oh, you bowed to everybody's will, Bungie's weak. And it's just really, really sad to see the community react this way. And now there was a bug with the quest this week, which should be fixed today. However, it stopped a lot of people from being able to progress, and it didn't happen to everybody. So it's just been a mess. And I feel so bad for the developers because I know some of those guys and they're wonderful people. But to see the Destiny community, instead of coming together to be supportive, it's very divisive and toxic right now. It breaks my heart.
That's, I think, for all of us, because we talk to developers a lot, that's really hard when you're someone who loves video games and hates bugs, and you want it now in a CHV and that should happen, but you also know all the people working behind the scenes, and it's so heartbreaking to see that there might be a decision somewhere else in the company that those developers aren't at fault for, but they're the ones under fire. That
Yeah.
always makes me sad.
Yeah, and Bungie's a studio that's had a lot of ups and downs with that game as well, right? They've gone through
Very
the
much so.
deep and survived. The community's been with them through all of it. To see them turn on them this quickly over something that seems so trivial overall, and that's very fixable in comparison to leaving Activision or buying themselves back from a Microsoft that they've done over the years, I have faith that Bungie will be able to do this.
Is it really worse than the launch of either of the games?
Current state, no. There's so much to do, but yeah, I mean, that's the really sad thing about a lot of gamer communities is that you know, the hindsight or memory of everybody is, you know, nobody seems to remember, you know, like where we were, you know, 2-3 years ago when the game came out. Now we're in this place again where the game is so much better than it used to be, but we're willing to eviscerate the developers over something that's not that big of a deal. I've just been playing Fallout 76 instead. Now that it's fixed, I'll go play Destiny again.
Nice. All right, Reinessa, your reaction time.
Okay, so mine is this really cool thing that I learned, actually. So no hot takes or flame this week. You know, we can leave that to JV. But I have this friend who is in his final year, and he's doing game design at a university, and he's creating an engine, and I don't really understand all of it, but it was just the coolest demonstration of how games get built layer by layer. And in light of all the new hardware announcements coming out with like Unreal Engine 5 and the 30 series graphics cards and everything, he explained it as the engine loads in this flat image that you can't actually see, and then it pins textures to every layer, and then it has to light those textures. So it has to determine the like origin of the light source, and then every single pixel figures out where it is in relation to the light source and how it should be lighted. And then you also have to, because your monitors aren't actually 3D, there's then a part in the computer where it takes it from being actually 3D to being 2D but looking like it's 3D because your eyes trick you. And it was the most fascinating discussion that I think, in relation to what Blaine is talking about, I wish that we knew more from the development side of things, because every time I get a chance to talk to a student at like our game showcase at DreamHack, or listen to one of the indie developers speak, or, you know, talk to someone at a big studio like Hi-Rez, they're huge teams of people, it is so cool to see how game design actually functions, and then to sit there and listen to this incredibly complex procedure to make the freaking cardboard box that Snake hides under. Okay, all of that was for like a Metal Gear Solid cardboard box. And to realize that amount of level and detail goes into these tiny little things in games, it was the coolest thing for me. And now I just want to go and just start stalking a bunch of game developers and be like, tell me more, I must learn. So, you know, my reaction time is apparently that I'm going to go stalk people.
Yeah, I was about to say that's less
Fair
of a
enough.
reaction time, more of a restraining order, I think, in the near future. But
We're going with alliteration here, you know, as if R is close enough, we were staying in the same alphabet category. I thought that was fine.
yeah, that makes sense. Didn't even need Grammarly to figure that one out. Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's something that really always for me was something that really strikes me as odd, that like gamers don't want to know more about what's going on there. But you know, a lot of people are very, you know, gimme now, you know, I want it now or whatever. But a good resource for that, for anybody who's listening, is Gama Sutra. It is a website that game developers and other folks in the industry, reporters, etc., post to. It's kind of like a, you know, big like blog site, I guess, and is the best way to put it. But there's tons of resources for you to learn a lot about how development actually happens and works, straight from the typing fingers of developers.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I guess for some folks, it's almost like a "do you really want to know how the sausage gets made" kind of situation. But no, I think it's super interesting, and it's cool that even the most menial things still take so much attention to detail. How much of that is being automated, though, to a degree, with these rapid changes in technology? I know last week we talked a little bit about Unreal 5. Like that helps alleviate the burden a bit, right, Blaine?
Yeah, we'll give him a moment. I think it does. I think the power of the engine has done a lot, and that's the whole thing. The like tech advances have done so much for what games can do. Like the fact that this student is talking to me about, you know, his artistic design, all these things, the fact that he can run that from his home PC as a student, especially while everyone is stuck at home, and doesn't have to be on some high powered $10,000 gaming rig to develop all these things. That's what I think is the coolest part. And I think that's the reason we're seeing like a really big indie explosion too.
Yeah, true.
Like indie games are so awesome now.
Oh,
Yep. All right.
literally downloaded Untitled Goose Game right before this call. Ready to honk aggressively at some folks.
Excellent. All right, Kyle, what's your reaction? What are you hitting us with?
I found out they're still making PS2 games.
Wait, what? What?
Yeah.
Wait, for who?
Sure, but the year is 2020, if you guys had not heard, and we are making PlayStation 2 games. My watch is more powerful than a PlayStation 2 last time I checked, and they are making games for that thing. And the best part for me is that this is a game that's released across platforms. This is PS4, PS3, onto the Switch, onto the all of the modern platforms are also getting this game. So how are they designing a game that can run on PS2 and still run on these other modern systems as well? It's kind of like wizardry when you look at some of the other studios. Are like, oh no, we can't make games run on that system. That doesn't work that way. But someone is still making Disaster Report 4, which you run around Tokyo as a reporter reporting on what looks to be the apocalypse happening in Tokyo. And this game is probably graphics level about 2002, to put it into perspective. So I feel like that's part of what they're going to have to do to make sure these games stay there. But how big of a market is there to say that I'm still going to put games on a disc? This is not a download. This is still a disc that you got to put in a PS2. There's cost behind this. There's money that's being dedicated into this way more than the digital game. So what market do they see that is still valuable enough for the PS2? And are they selling consoles as well if they're still selling games for it? It just blows my mind that a 20-plus-year-old console is still alive and functioning with games being developed. My Xbox won't even turn on from the 360 era. Red Ring of Death.
Oh, okay. That's fair. I thought you were talking about the original beefy black box.
Oh, no. I beat that thing with a hammer trying to get it to fix one time, and it fixed itself.
Yeah, it's like
the Flintstone
method. Yeah, the Flintstone method. No, I feel like those are the OG Xboxes. They're like those Nokia phones that had Snake on it, like not the flip ones. Like you could make a game out of trying to break the thing. It's built to last, man.
My dad did run over his Nokia phone. That happened. It was fine.
Like on purpose?
Like with a car? No, but like phone just ran out and it's fine. Survived.
Nokia phones are the OG tank, I think, IRL. They tank everything.
I drop my iPhone nowadays from a high enough distance, like, a foot, it'll crack.
I could sneeze on it, it'll probably crack, honestly.
Those allergies are a real problem for you then.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to figure out what kind of watch Kyle has. That's apparently a PS2. I want that watch.
I think he's talking about an Apple Watch.
Apple Watch,
which is probably I could see that being.
Yeah, he's powerful. An Apple guy.
But they're
powerful. Oh my gosh.
They've got a lot in this little thing. It's more powerful than what we got to the moon with for most normal watches nowadays. So in 20 years, my watch is definitely more powerful than a PS2 is my assumption. It's smaller, so it's got to be more powerful.
I saw the funniest thing from this video covering a bunch of flat earthers, and they were saying, you see, we got NASA backed up into a corner. We're giving them funding again, so now they can't fake the moon landing twice. I was like, y'all, y'all are drinking some special kind of stupid.
Wow.
It's wild. So wild.
And now, onto that segue of and the moon being staged. Speaking of some studio work, we've been doing some extra studio work as DreamHack lately. Actually, we have 2.5 productions going on in our studio currently in Stockholm. And one of the biggest ones that we have is our Masters product. And there's a match going on currently with my boys in blue. Team
That's
Liquid.
what you were
He's
doing.
holding up, guys, holding up a Team
Mhm.
Liquid hat for those who are listening.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. I thought you just had an aneurysm mid hosting duties, but I'm glad you're still with us, Kyle.
You're welcome. And we actually have a guest today to bring on to talk a little bit about our Masters product with us and his experience with working with DreamHack and FPS games in general. So Steve Sampson is our logistics and shipping manager on the operations team. Steve, how are you today?
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you on. Have you been able to catch any of the Masters happening over the past couple of days?
A bit, yeah. I've had the stream on in the background for sure while work's going on. So it doesn't stop the day, but obviously good always to watch some CS. So always love it.
That's pretty much a requirement for working at DreamHack, by the way. If you're working in the office and there's not a stream up on one of your monitors, something's that people get worried.
Especially one of ours, right? So
Yeah, of course.
Is there ever not a DreamHack stream on, to be honest?
surprisingly, yes.
Yeah,
Surprisingly, yes.
Hey, they run rerun
Working on it.
streams. I relive Meme League many times on the DreamHack
That's
Dota
true.
channel. That is a great channel.
Quality content.
Reruns are fantastic content to keep it refreshed, especially during this downtime. But did you catch that Astralis game around G2 or a little bit earlier, Steve?
You know, I was in a couple meetings, so I was watching out of the corner of my eye, and just about when my meetings ended, I realized that Astralis got O2'd. So
What?
Crazy.
Wait, what?
Yeah. that was
Wait,
Reinessa
but-
clearly prepared for this podcast.
I was recording earlier too. You shush. But okay, so I can't even word right now. Important question. They're running the 7-man roster right now, right? So did they like swap in the water boy today?
Yeah, so Glaive actually is not playing right now for various reasons, but it's actually been really interesting to watch. The games have obviously been high intensity as they always are when Astralis plays, but it just looks like that G2 got the best of them today.
Interesting.
They were playing at full performance. They really didn't let them have an inch is what it felt like during that game. I was fortunate enough to catch a lot of it, and it was impressive to watch them fall apart without that in-game lead of Glaive being right there to show them exactly what needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like the game itself is really dynamic in the sense that each match and each round can be very, very different. And Astralis have really made it a point to kind of put this team together that it almost seems like they can't lose at times. But you know, happy to be sitting here, and you know, it's a Masters event. Anything can happen, and we just see that, you know, each and every day when the teams suit up in their studios and get on to play online, that it's anybody's game really. If you're here, you're good enough to play and you're good enough to win.
So,
Who's your favorite to win everything at this point?
I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say that you know, Astralis still can do that. But you know, they've got to get their stuff together. Obviously, there's going to be some discussions that need to be had on their end in terms of what needs to be done to adjust here.
So Masters was the first tournament I ever watched for CSGO because CSGO wasn't my jam. Do you remember? Like, can you? Because obviously you are way more involved with it than I am. So, like, do you remember what got you into pro? Because for a lot of people, like, if you think about it, if you look at the numbers of who watches tournaments versus numbers of players, there's obviously way more people playing. So, I'm curious, like, how did you get into watching?
For sure. I mean, I guess I can start, you know, basically when I started playing FPS games, I started with Unreal Tournament in 99, and Counter-Strike wasn't even out then. Counter-Strike was originally released, I think, 2000. So you're talking over 20 years ago now when I first started playing.
Kyle, could your watch play Counter-Strike, do you think?
Oh, I mean, it's probably better than I am at Counter-Strike, that's for sure.
Source. Probably not Geo.
No.
And then, you know, CSGO was released in 2012, so I think August of 2012. So you're talking coming up on 9 years now. And really the progression for me has just been, you know, love playing it, love watching it. I obviously still play a little bit to this day, not as much as I used to. But for me, it all kind of grew out of of playing it. And then really, I think the interesting part for me is when you watch these professional teams, I think it's easy to forget just how insanely good these players are, each and every one of them. It doesn't matter what team you're on. I mean, if you've made it to a Masters event or you've made it to a Valve major on one of these top tier teams, I mean, you're good enough to play against anybody. And just the reaction time, It's a mental game, and it's also a physical game. And what they bring to the table, I think, is just absolutely astounding. And that's what I like to watch, is just see what crazy stuff they're going to be able to pull off next match. That's what gets me watching it.
I feel like
three-man stack.
I feel like what makes CS so digestible for me is that they just have the best tools to tell such a easy to follow story, right? When you talk about the gameplay itself, it's very complicated, of course, from an executional perspective, but it makes sense to even somebody who's watching for the first time, right? You understand fundamentally that one team's trying to plant a bomb, the other team's trying to stop them. It's fairly simple. But then you combine that with top of the line, probably honestly the best spectator tools in the biz, as well as casters who have eaten and slept and really lived with this game for over a decade now.
Well, and then you also look at the production team too, right?
Yep.
Like, think about our people who are on Masters. I'm sure Dagny's out there in the studio. You're right. They live and breathe CS. They know everything about it. They know the players. They know the memes. They know whose face to like zoom in on when even producing from home, right? You webcam call in. You can still have that slow zoom because you know something's coming, and that always has elevated the DreamHack product for me too, is because like our people
For
know
sure.
it
And
so
the
well.
professional scene is such a community as well. Just like you said, I think everyone involved, production side, you kind of have to be that all around CS fan to want to work on something like this. I mean, it's long hours. You're there morning, noon, and night. You know, sometimes, God bless Mod, like sometimes doesn't get any sleep when he's running those tournaments, especially when they run late and you're going into overtime. It seems like every match, right? So these are people that really like live and breathe the game itself, and a lot of them play. So I think it's very much a culture and a family as well.
I remember a clip from DreamHack Open. I think it was maybe Atlanta 2017, maybe 2018. But one of the players made a pretty good play, and his teammate went to go fist bump him, and it was totally not returned. And one of our camera guys fist bumped for him.
Yes. Oh, I love that one.
I forgot about that. Oh, that was so
Such a
good.
good clip.
Oh man. I love that.
Yeah.
Even in a game like CS, which has been around for so long, even when these people who know CS to such an insane degree still find a way to get surprised by something at every one of our tournaments. It's so beautiful that this game is still full of surprises like that.
Even yesterday, there was a match where, it was three versus nothing. I mean, they were just waiting for the bomb defusal. Didn't defuse the bomb, and it went into overtime, and they lost the match. So it really is, yeah. So it's really like one of those games where I think that, like I said, you bring it every time. You suit up and you bring everything you have to the table, and everyone's top tier at this point, and anything can happen. And a simple miscommunication on who should be defusing the bomb and who has the kit can wind up losing you the match. So
the smallest of details.
Yeah, for sure.
We talked a little bit about the production and what goes into making these events happen. Steve, you're one of the people that helps us on the physical side of things with operations and getting all of the gear to our shows. And you had the privilege to work on one of these Masters events, Dallas events last year, actually, as we should all be in Texas about right now. But what was that experience like? What was it like being on a Masters project?
So it's kind of like a badge of pride. I really think that it's a step above, obviously a step above our regular, DreamHack Open product that we bring with us throughout the year. And it's just a different caliber of team that you attract. It's a different caliber of talent that you attract, and it's a different audience, So for me, I was honored to work on the project and facilitate things in a logistics way. I can tell you that it's pretty crazy, seeing something from idea to conception, and then, moving in the venue and bringing the equipment in, and then seeing the players arrive. And that day when you go live and you've got, all the branding up, and that first game kind of gives you goosebumps to know that you've worked on a project of such scale and such importance. And that's not to diminish anything else that we do at the show or any of the other projects that we work on, but certainly being in the arena in Dallas was a special experience for me, and getting to take some time during the event to actually go up into the stands and sit down and watch the final was really special for me.
Yeah, that event was something different and unique for all of us. Making it a production that is live while we're building the rest of our show meant that we had to move in a little bit earlier. And that was a fun, complex piece of having a live production running while we are building the rest of a DreamHack festival. Unique pieces that none of us had dealt with. And it's always such an undertaking whenever we do have one of these Masters events, because the scale is so much larger than anything else that we really do. It is our top tier as DreamHack. It is the pinnacle of our Counter-Strike esports, and we are working with some of the best teams out there that demand the best of quality and care for their teams as well. How many team rooms did we end up hosting downstairs in Dallas?
I couldn't even tell you.
You would have had 16 teams. Yeah,
16 teams. And I think that's the interesting part is, you know, when we move in and we start to go live and quote unquote live, right? I mean, you've got 16 teams that fly in, and some are leaving a day, 2 days later, after they've been eliminated, and we're still building the rest of the festival, right? So that part was definitely really interesting to see kind of how they handled that, and especially with the press days mixed in and all that stuff. But certainly a unique show for us, and I think that, you know, at DreamHack we strive to have obviously top tier production quality in everything we do. But you can just sense that the stakes are higher at a Masters event. And, you know, people are going that extra mile to make sure that, you know, everyone in the building is happy. When we expect, especially when you attract that talent and you attract these teams, they're accustomed to getting treated a certain way. So that obviously adds a different element into the picture that sometimes we don't initially deal with.
I'd also like to say that as a privileged DreamHack person, getting to look down on Masters from the 90 feet up ceiling of that venue, that was like, Masters was cool, the production was cool, but let me tell you, looking at the whole production and the stage in Dallas, I think it was about 90 feet. There was you could go up and walk across like this lattice work with all of these holes in the floor and look down and see all of the cameras and the stage and everything, and it was terrifying and fascinating. We need to do another one there. I want to go back up there.
Literally a top-down perspective.
Yeah, it was very cool.
It's our own observer tool.
Exactly. Just like CSGO has great top-down observing, we have it for our Masters too.
The Dallas venue, perfect venue for that.
You know what was the big factor, though, that a lot of folks didn't see coming for that event? Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
Yo, that was
pretty wild.
That was pretty sweet.
Oh, man.
If you haven't checked that episode out on Disney Plus of Jeff Goldblum's Curiosities, I believe is the episode or the show.
The world according to Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. The World According to Jeff Goldblum. And we do have an episode of our Dallas show that was featured on there. And
it's a really good episode.
Great episode.
I'm slightly biased, but I think the DreamHack bits are the best bits of that episode.
Oh, yeah.
I'm slightly biased.
We spent a little bit too long on the LARPing, I think.
Maybe.
Just a little bit.
Maybe.
Well, Steve, you don't play just CS. You do have this unique, love for FPS games, I think, but you have an obsession with Overwatch that I would like to announce is probably unhealthy.
So
I
Kyle's
do know
out here
personally.
outing people. Got it.
Yes,
I didn't know you played. Carry me.
Oh, he's a good Overwatch player.
So it's actually funny. I actually haven't played a lot of Overwatch recently. But honestly, one of the things that got me to move to Overwatch is, honestly, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I might get flack for this, but the CSGO market is just 100% at this point oversaturated. You know, there's just too much. There's too much of it going on all year round. And with so many tournaments and stuff to watch in varying formats, I imagine as a player, as a CSGO player, a professional player, it's hard to get that sense of accomplishment when you win unless you're competing in a major, just because they're all the time, all year round. And one of the things that really pushed me to other games was, honestly, I just got tired of playing Counter-Strike for a bit. So when CSGO came out, I never really made the full transition from Counter-Strike Source. I played competitively, TWL and Cal and Source. I never really made that full transition to the competitive scene when Go came out. So, I've always been open to playing other FPS, whether that's Battlefield or Call of Duty, Overwatch, dabbled a little bit in Valorant now. But it's just the play style that I like. And so when Blizzard announced Overwatch and I saw the trailer and I was like, holy crap, like this is going to be something really special and something really different than we normally see in just a straight tactical first-person shooter. It's something that I really, really got interested in, and I've been playing ever since.
10 out of 10 on IGN.
Yeah, and I think they just got rated. I just read an article yesterday. They got rated like one of the best of all time or something like that. But I won't say that it's without its problems, because it certainly is, and you can find that documentation if you if you look for it, right? And I have my own opinions on all of that, but it's definitely a different take on a first-person shooter, which I really appreciate. And just having such a unique game with unique characters and unique heroes, unique stories, and really the different ways in which you can utilize those heroes and play them in game has been really interesting to me.
Yeah. I will say, as much as the current state of Overwatch, I think is with its fair share of challenges. I think I could say that. Even when I think back, especially when it comes to multiplayer games, there are a few games where I have had as high highs as I have playing Overwatch with my friends and family. Like it's just such a fun, welcoming experience for people who are at all levels of their knowledge of FPSs, right? I have potato hands and potato brain, so I can mess around with Winston and Reinhardt and feel really good about myself.
It's all about Farah and the rocket launchers. Just blow stuff up the entire. It doesn't matter if you're hitting anybody or doing anything. You just blow things up the whole
You
time.
just have
It
to
matters
get
a little
close,
bit.
it's
You're
fine.
not playing Junkrat.
Spray and pray.
You coming at my boy Junkrat right now?
One of the things that I think really, really interested me in Overwatch was the fact that it's such a team-centric game.
Yeah.
When you think about other FPSs and CSGO in particular, I mean, we've seen it in professional tournaments, and I'm sure we've all seen it in game, but you can carry. I mean, you actually can carry in that game. In Overwatch, not so much. It really depends on your team composition and the heroes that you selected and the abilities that you have and ultimate management and time management. And there's just a lot of other things that come into play than just saying, oh, Steve is the best, McCree, he'll carry it, and so that to me really interests me from the outset, because it really kind of refocused on this 6-man team that I was like, oh, cool. Like this is actually a game that we can sit down and play, with a group of friends and really all contribute in a really important way, where it really just takes that extra level of communication and coordination. And not to say that doesn't exist in Counter-Strike, because it certainly does. But the ability for one player to make such a significant impact, I think, is quite different when you compare Counter-Strike to Overwatch.
So how many people on a Crucible team?
That I actually don't know. I was watching a little bit yesterday, and I think they do duos and squads of 3 now. But I didn't actually get to watch any of the game because they were having server issues.
That's rough.
Oh man, I did watch some of it, and I actually have played the game previously, and it's an interesting game. They're kind of combining some FPS and hero shooter and MOBA elements to create what so far seems like a pretty compelling experience, at least from the streamers I watched who were actually playing yesterday. So I don't know. I think it has some potential for sure.
Honestly, I didn't even know that Crucible was coming out. I knew that Amazon.
I didn't know they were launching it this soon. I thought it was going to be in beta for a while, but
yeah, I didn't even know one of them on the radar. Honestly, the other game that they were making was more on my radar. But Steve, if all of the characters in Crucible are as Funko Popped as the Overwatch ones are, will you be adding to the collection?
I mean,
wait, he does Funkos?
I do Funkos.
I so wish you had a nice shelf behind you right now so that Justin understood the extent to which you mean that statement.
Yeah. So there was a good, I mean, I'm looking at it over here. There's a good period of time where I was buying every single Overwatch Funko. I am happy to say that that addiction has ended. I am no longer purchasing every Overwatch Funko when I realized this will never end. But I do have some interesting pieces. I have a lot of the really rare ones, the all gold Funkos. They're actually worth a little bit of money now. For me, it was more of I love the game, so I loved the art. And I have one of the original Overwatch art books as well, coffee table book. Blizzard has really done a great job story-wise and art-wise, I think, with that game. And such a compelling story and backstory to each and every hero that it really kind of got me kind of like, this is something that I actually want to display. This is something that I'm really interested in. And it was really, I never bought a Funko Pop until Overwatch. So, but yes, that addiction has ended. I don't foresee myself adding to that collection or any collection until I decide what to do with what I already have. So.
How long have you been clean for, buddy?
Yeah.
Months now for sure.
So if we send you another display shelf, you won't feel compelled to fill it.
I mean, that's like, if you give someone extra closet space, they're going to find something to put there, right? So I can't make you that guarantee, but obviously if I had a pile of extra cash and extra place to put it, I probably could find some stuff to buy for sure. Absolutely.
If you see Steve at the show and he's got Funko Pops in his arms, definitely stop him. He's got a problem.
Full tackle. Yes. It's for his own good.
Don't send me anything either. I don't need any help collecting anything. Don't give me ideas. Don't suggest anything.
I mean, how's your sticker collection? I feel like you should have a pretty good DreamHack staff sticker collection.
So, it's interesting too, because I, at one point was like, I've got a really good sticker collection going on. And then I had the right idea of actually using all those stickers on my laptop. And then I did what everyone does and got a new laptop. So I actually don't have a lot of the stickers that I have collected. But that's all right. I have some in a drawer here. And now I'm like, I don't really know what to do with them. They're nice to look at. I want to put them on the laptop, but I'll just get another new laptop and then I won't have the stickers anymore. So they sit with, my credentials and the badges and the pins and all that stuff. And they serve as a good memory of stuff that we've done, especially Rocket League in Montreal was a very special production for us. So some of that stuff is good to go down memory lane every now and then for sure.
Wait, who else on the team's a collector? Now I just got to know, because I don't collect anything. The closest thing to a collection that I have would be Nintendo 64 controllers, because your boy plays too much Mario Party. And also a giant binder full of Pokemon cards. That's it. That's all I have. And it's the childhood binder at that.
Yeah,
I am definitely a collector.
Oh yeah,
I have a lot of Magic cards. Not as many as Torben does though. But I have a lot of Magic cards, Pokemon cards, pins, stickers. I'm a big sticker guy actually. I have too many things. I really need to get rid of some. Books. I have a lot of books.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have a bunch of Dota stuff, none of which I have bought. Not a single thing back there was purchased by me in any way, shape, or form. I just have them, and I love them, but they sit there and collect dust.
How much have you spent in game? That's the question.
I have probably spent of my own money less than $80 in game, because when you attend the International and you are in the stands, you can earn drops, and those drops sell for $400. So I am still using Steam money from an event 3 years ago.
Yep. My fiance got one and I did not. I was very sad, but she got one and sold it because she doesn't play Dota. 380 I think was what hers. What? Okay.
4.
Not talking to you anymore.
I mean, it is crazy. Some of these games, even Counter-Strike, like the market is ridiculous.
Dude,
absolutely ridiculous.
It's gotten kind of crazy over the years, hasn't it? Expanded much further and further beyond that. And ultimately, a lot of these companies have become bigger and branded because of all of that exchanging the economy around these games. Well, Steve, I think this is where we actually have to part ways with you, sir. But thank you for coming onto the show. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time. We know you're a busy guy trying to prepare for a lot of the things that we have going on still in the background right now that you guys may know about if you have heard the announcements, but if not, go check those out. They should be out there by now. And
was that a wink?
It was like a sideways chicken bob nudge.
I think he was trying to wink, but it came out more like a tunuk, and I was very offended for a second.
But Steve's getting out just in time.
Yeah, just in the nick of time. No, thank you for having me on. It was great to talk a little bit, and you guys enjoy.
Thanks, dear buddy.
Always nice to have some of our colleagues on the show and get to know a little bit more about them and the things that they enjoy.
I'm thinking the next office week, man. Would I be rude if the next office week I showed up and just like put a Funko Pop around the office somewhere and kept moving it?
No.
That's part of being in the office is that we have to haze each other. It's just a thing.
100%.
For sure.
It's team building.
Before we got into, or before we let Steve go, we were talking a little bit about how these bigger companies and the brands that have essentially been established around the economy of video games have progressed and have grown up over the years of us enjoying them to the point where they still make PS2 games. So for the current climate right now, we've seen a lot of changes happening in what we grew up with. And these studios that we've seen for 10, 20 years out there are starting to make some bigger differentiating markers in their history. And one of the ones this past week was Mojang. They moved from Mojang to Mojang Studios, which in my mind, if you look at some of the other studios that have done similar things over the past years, they're looking to expand their library. They may be making another game. Same thing with another game other than a Minecraft title from Mojang.
200 million sales, really getting to their heads right there.
No, right, 120 million actives. Maybe they can do something with it. But I'm excited to see what comes out of that. But there's a couple other bigger brands that have also gone along the same rebranding line. Sony is another publisher and studio that has a lot of control. Looks like they're trying to build a more agnostic style company or production arm to allow for them to produce games for multiple platforms, as we talked about with Xbox and how they're diversifying over the past couple console cycles to become more of a Steam than a hardware manufacturer. So this past week, Reinessa, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about Evil Geniuses, because they are such a big TI winner and prominent force in Dota. They rebranded this week with what is being looked at as better than before.
It was hard to be worse than before, to be honest. So I'm going to say this. I didn't hate their logo that it was, which was straight up just the words Evil Geniuses with some cool design in it. I didn't hate that as a logo in and of itself. But as EG's logo, which was iconic. I mean, we don't even have to talk Dota. We could talk StarCraft. Let's go back further. Like, EG is iconic. And to completely remove, I thought their logo was cool and you knew what it was. It's like Team Liquid. You identify. So you really can't get worse than that, because they stripped away all their branding here. But for those who aren't as familiar with esports, it's a very funny story, because they launched it and everybody hated it. But then Alex Garfield, who used to own, very involved, big part of the origin of EG and everything, was just like, not my logo, not my team. How dare you ruin my legacy this way? And so the first thing I did when EG announced their rebrand is I ran straight to his Twitter and just refreshed it all day to wait and see what he said. And he was like, still not exactly what I would have chosen, but I guess it's okay. And so and I think that's where everybody is landing, is that it's okay. At least it looks kind of like the old EG logo. It's kind of there, but we've seen this battle being fought. Like, Virtus Pro has changed their logo several times. Fnatic updated their logo to be more modern. And for some reason, modern seems to mean like spiky and blocky and hard edges. And we've seen a lot of companies transition to that. And I really wonder, is it that EG wants to be known as more than just the TI winning team? Is it that Fnatic wants to be, like, I'm sure Blaine could speak to this, wants to be more current and relevant, so that when they're doing sponsorships, their logo translates to more of what those sponsors, it's odd because you have built yourself on a legacy that people love and trust. And the EG logo was not bad. It wasn't cartoony. It wasn't drawn in MS Paint. It was clean. So I'm very curious what the pressures are. Like, what makes you feel the need to do that?
That's the stark contrast that we see, is that our organizations that we're a part of and the industry in general is so young that these were literally teenagers and college kids that were building businesses.
Yeah.
You don't really think about that the logo you're designing needs to be put onto 14 million things, including a letterhead, a t-shirt, and your website when you're designing your logo, right? So what are you looking at as an early business? And it's just get it out there. And that's why we see the initial reactions of the fans from these teams of past are just dedicated to what it used to be and hate anything that changes and is new. Yeah. But it is easier for them to continue with what their long-term brand guidelines will be set out of this, I imagine, to put it on a t-shirt, to use it for sponsorships. That's all a part of what the decision-making is behind these rebrands, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and some of it has to do with overall business decisions as well. So, you can go so far on your current logo, right? But like Reinessa mentioned, what happens when you're dealing with sponsors and fitting it in with their stuff and partnerships. It can be a very complex question, right? And sometimes it's also just about making waves again. A logo refresh, especially on a popular team, now it's literally everywhere on the internet, and that's all everybody's talking about right now, right? So sometimes it can be, just a purely aesthetic decision of, hey, look, it's time for a refresh. We need to be modern, and a 20-year-old logo doesn't serve that anymore. Fair. And at the same time, if you use it right, it's an incredibly powerful business tool. So there's a lot of interesting pieces that go into this kind of thing.
We see a lot of the big businesses that have done this over the years. One of my favorites is Starbucks. They used to say Starbucks Coffee Company all around the outside of the mermaid. And they made the mermaid a little bit cleaner, a little less detailed, something that's more recognizable from no matter what distance you're looking at it from. All these things go into making that logo more and more clear. So people understand that it is Starbucks, but it was also limiting to Starbucks because they were defined as a coffee company. The majority of Starbucks' sales are actually going more towards food than they are towards coffee nowadays. So they wanted to be seen as something broader than just coffee. And making that clear delineation to their community by removing that word, just it makes sense. It feels right. And a lot of what we're seeing for this brand stuff is all based off of feeling, because you are looking at something and you need to take that picture and relate it to a million things in your head that tie to you spending money on that brand in the long run for it to be worth it. So what are the things that motivate from like the community side? JV, I think this is kind of towards you. What really motivates that community to look at a brand and say like, yeah, I want to put my money towards that, especially when they're refreshing something that people were already spending money on? Well,
I think that part of it really deals with how that brand fits within this entire ecosystem, right? I think that even though I wasn't crazy about the last rebrand EG did, one thing they did a really good job of was turning heel and being the heel in the esports community, right? I feel like everybody wanted to be the hero. If you look at most social media pages within the spectrum of esports, by and large, everybody wants to be the hero of this narrative. And so for EG to come through and position themselves as a marketing strategy as villainous, like, to me, that's brilliant, right? That aspect alone is really brilliant. And you couple the one good thing to really come out of that previous rebrand now with the fresh coat of paint that harkens back to the days of old a bit, while still building on the ground that they were able to establish from a feeling and voice perspective. And I think they have a lot of potential to fit a pretty unique puzzle piece within the esports space of having legacy as well as a future. Because I think a lot of these teams, unfortunately, are sort of pigeonholed in this weird position, especially as we're approaching an era that's really warped with a ton of outside hedge funds coming through to throw massive amounts of money. And the reality is that not all these teams are positioned well to make it for the future. But I think that EG is unique in the sense that they have such a history, legacy, before them, and I think that they have a bright future ahead of them too if they keep treading along the path.
Definitely. The money that's coming into this space right now is just insane. And during our current climate, I feel like the money is going to be redirected into gaming to where it was intended for conventional competitive entertainment. So talking more about these big brands that have gotten into the space over the years, we were talking Crucible earlier, but that's also Amazon, who got into Twitch and has really tried to redefine themselves for our generation, it feels like, as this gaming company. But Amazon is historically not. They're a book company, if we want to go all the way back to it, right?
Yeah,
So
that's what it was when I was in college.
Right? How are these companies getting into this space and using the leverage they have with this money to try and buy in and buy our trust through these other companies? It's almost backdooring, right? Blaine, I guess, some of the examples that you've seen over the years of other companies that have done this, you are the representative for the sales and the money side of things from that side, dealing with the bigger businesses for DreamHack. I feel like you've seen a couple of these over the years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, using that reference again, I guess. But so with these with these sponsorships, and when you're getting into sponsoring teams and whatnot, understanding their audience, there are many times in the past that we've seen, and I'm not going to call anybody out specifically, but there are many times in the past that we've seen where the activations come off as very disingenuous, and you end up with, the brand gets some attention, but then everybody just trashes them because they know that it's a sellout move, or like I said, disingenuous, because authenticity is extremely key in the esports and gaming space, as gamers can smell a sellout from 80 miles away, because we're very sensitive to it and we care a lot about what's going on, especially with our teams. So there's so many bad examples, but there's some super good ones too, actually, of non-endemic brands getting into the gaming space and being genuine. Probably my favorite is Arby's. Arby's has done an incredible job. The team behind that is just absolute geniuses. So, there's tons of good examples and there's tons of bad examples out there, but at the end of the day, it's key to actually know the community and speak to them. You're not trying to sell them something. You're trying to present yourself to the community and ask them to accept you.
You can also have it like backfire and then actually refire, being super beneficial. So I don't know how familiar anybody is with Dota memes, but Mercedes sponsored an ESL, and they ran like a normal TV commercial, like the Mercedes E-Class sedan, best in its, like a very normal car commercial, but like ran it
kind of you'd see on TV.
Yeah, ran it during ESL, and it got memed nonstop. So now if you just type ESL in a Reddit thread, you will get 20 people replying to you with the exact text from the ad, be like, the Mercedes E-Class sedan. It's like, look at that marketing. I'm talking about this years later from it happening. And it's like, the ad wasn't bad. It's not Mercedes's fault, but that's just how Twitch chat and Reddit chose to take it. And then I think the next ESL, they actually memed it and made an ad based around that.
Yeah.
See, that's the real kick, is when something bad happens, if you can turn it around and spin it and you just own it. It's that authenticity thing again. You just own it, and the community is going to resonate with it. They're going to love it. They're going to be like, it's like when you're hanging out with your buds and you're the guy that farted. Well, just own it. Everybody's going to think it's funny in the end, right?
By the meminess of Dream League is so perfect for our community. It just embodies exactly what that community needs to be satisfied. And it's always a struggle for us as these bigger businesses are trying to come in. That means that we are also growing as an industry, and we're going to need to interact with these other bigger businesses. So we have to grow up as well. And there's so many of the other companies that we've seen in our space that you can watch the struggles. And, we feel it internally here with DreamHack as well, that there is a growth struggle. We're hitting that point of growing up pretty big. I mean, when Blaine and I started, there was less than 50 people at the company. And we're rapidly growing towards 100 if we're not already there. And the the industry is scaling like this all together, but when we are put in a position to have to put our big boy pants on and go interact with these other big brands, sometimes we get smacked down because we just aren't big enough yet and aren't professional enough. We haven't had enough experience in these fields where this is hundreds of years worth of business that we're going up and putting ourselves into. And how does Dream League fit into conventional business at the end of the day?
Yeah, but the real question is, how does conventional business fit into Dream League? Because guess who's got the money and the spending power and the eyeballs now? It's a new generation.
I was going to say, how does conventional business fit into conventional business, period? Like, the reality is, like, the world is so different now. The marketing plays that worked even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they're not even relevant anymore. Like, the entire landscape has changed so much, and it really is the Wild West. And brands are starting to recognize that not only is it important for them to come into our space, but to not make it so that it's such a hands-off, set it and forget it activity. Like, they have to do their homework and they have to do their research to be successful here. That Mercedes-Benz commercial didn't say something like it's time to grow up, which is probably the worst thing to say to an arena full of video game fans. Like, true. But it was cool that they're able to pivot and create a new commercial that's more centric towards that kind of fan and have such an overwhelming shift in reception as a result of that. I think that it's not necessarily a factor of getting in and hitting a slam dunk your first time in, because most brands really won't do that. I think the most important thing is to put something out and listen and keep iterating again and again in this space. And eventually you will build that community, you will build that following, and you will build that brand loyalty, especially right now where it's still a huge deal whenever a non-endem jumps into this space. You know, like when the Dallas Fuel announced that Jack in the Box was one of their primary partners, my timeline was flooded with people eating Jack in the Box tacos. Like, I don't even like these tacos, but I gotta support them.
They're a dollar. I gotta support my team.
Yeah, and you know, if Jack in the Box did that for the NFL, like, you wouldn't see that same reaction. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, good for you, Roger Goodell." Like, you know, nobody cares. But in this space, any money that brands commit is very much noticed, not only by I guess us as tournament organizers, players, sponsors, teams, etc., but really community-wide as well. And that sort of affinity and loyalty, you'd have to pay such a premium on, such a ludicrous premium on, to get it off of any other medium.
Well, I think this is something that helps us stand out, and this will be what we close with for today, is the thought of how gaming is better in so many ways than other industries. I will say that proudly, that we are better. And to go back to JB's initial point that you made during reaction time, that constant, hard work is one thing, but actually being smart and understanding the space and being aware of how it's changed over the past 10 years and how the playbook is constantly changing every single day. We're adaptive. Gamers are some of the most adaptive people on this freaking planet, and I love that about us. We play so many different games. We put ourselves in front of so many different mediums that we understand and can adapt to all of it. So what does that mean for our future in this world of business? I think it's bright and very fruitful for gaming and esports, let alone the rest of the industry that is building around all of this. So I'm very excited to see where this takes us, and brand refreshes and all of the fun growing up that we have to go through as an industry. We'll make it, and we'll be pretty fucking cool someday. But for now, we are gaming, we are esports, and we are proud of where we are. And it's been a long journey, and I'm glad that you guys were able to tune in and also listen to this beautiful podcast that we have all crafted together. Thank you, Reinessa, JV, and Blaine, my co-hosts, for also being here today. But this wraps up our episode of DreamHack Download. Make sure you like, subscribe, and give us all of the wonderful follows on our DreamHack socials. And if you would like to check out some of the other episodes you haven't listened to already, make sure and go through the archives, because there may be some that you missed. Until next time, we'll see you then.